So based on the overall needs as we define them in Nepal, the vulnerability, the dynamic of the higher altitudes, the fact that many people are living in these areas in very severe weather conditions, with lack of food security in most of these areas, we developed what we call a Rural Community Infrastructure Works Program, RCIW. RCIW is the acronym that we use. It means Rural Community Infrastructure Works, and it's a type of food for work program, FFW in our jargon, and we implemented this program jointly with GTZ. GTZ is the German technical agency, which is like a version of USAID in the German government, but specifically focused on the provision of technical assistance and technical support. They're a very key partner of ours in many projects around the world. We had a very unique, wonderful partnership with GTZ. The objectives of the program were to enable the hungry and rural poor to invest time in creating productive assets leading to food security. Now, productive assets could mean a road, building a road. And I'm not talking about a superhighway here that would be paved necessarily, but even improving trails in many of these more higher areas just to improve access. Agricultural production focus, natural resource management would be part of the objective. In the Terai area, for example, it would be management of the river banks to build small dike kinds of structures that would help control the flow of the river at the high water periods after monsoon, during monsoon. And then an underlying overall objective is simply to enhance capacity building at the local level. That's community development, community empowerment, working with communities to help them develop their needs and their objectives on their terms, most importantly. And we had a particular focus in this program on women. The way that we approached this project then with GTZ together was to focus on a particular backbone asset in a community. And then around that asset, building particular complementary activities in this program that would support community development, social mobilization, that would include activities of simply community training, participatory focus in how to enable change in the community, support the development of the municipality government, support the population understanding their role of government, what they should expect, what the legislation in the country is for, and how it should be affecting them or not affecting them, just to kind of help them understand how their government works overall. Functional literacy, many of the people in these communities in the most remote, poorest areas, least food secure areas would not have gone to school, would primarily be illiterate. The idea of how you can provide just basic literacy, functional literacy we call them, some basic skills like counting and being able to read minimally. Develop a savings and credit program, productive micro initiatives like fish ponds, orchards, irrigation. Actually, it was during this implementing this particular project many years ago in Nepal that I first heard of Auburn University, where we are now. Auburn University is known for its fisheries programs around the world. In our fish ponds, we were training women to first dig the ponds, that's the food for work part, and then we would be providing them small fingerlings to stock the ponds, and then they would grow the fish in the ponds. They would then harvest the fish both for their own protein, provision of protein in their families, but even more importantly as an income generating activity. And a number of the engineers and specialists who we had advising us in this program had been trained either at Auburn University or had been trained by fisheries experts who had come from Auburn. Orchards I mentioned for farmers, irrigation, and then community managed tourism. Many of us know Nepal as a tourist destination. Not just mountain climbers going to Mount Everest, but it's a fascinating country from a cultural point of view. It's where Buddhism and Hinduism come together and mix in a very interesting fashion. There's many beautiful sites, and the whole idea of how you can get these very marginal communities involved to benefit from those trekking past on these various trips, and how they can maybe sell their crafts, provide portering services, carrying equipment, carrying baggage and such. How they can otherwise be involved and benefit from that tourism coming from abroad. So here's an example then of a map, just to show you what a typical backbone asset would be. Now in this case, this is a rural road, and that road would have been the key focus of the project. So there would be the vast majority of those beneficiaries to the project and the participants would be receiving food for work. That is, they'd be receiving, in lieu of cash for a wage, they would be receiving food, which, remember now, would be much more valuable to them than cash would be. Because in these areas, if we've targeted the most food insecure areas up in the hills and mountains, a road like this would be the first time that they would have this type of opportunity for the markets to penetrate up, for the commercial sellers and that for food to penetrate up to their villages. And so having cash for wage for these people doesn't necessarily help them, because they're going to have to then find the food that they need, and oftentimes go down into the valleys and buy food at the various shops that would be available there. They lose a lot of time, it's opportunity costs. So if you provide food for work, you've helped them save time and money. So again, you know you're targeting well when people prefer food for work versus cash for work. So in this case, the backbone, as it were, is a road, a small track in many cases, not necessarily for four-wheel vehicles. But this would be providing access from the Terai areas up into the hills and mountains. There could be various micro projects that would be connected to the backbone. So the main project would be building the road, as I say, and then there would be additional participants who would be involved in agroforestry, for example, building the fish ponds, the example I used before, learning how to use irrigation, maybe building an irrigation scheme themselves and then learning to maintain it and manage it. There is a women's savings and credit group. There could be various types of these activities depending on the area, but there will always be the same key backbone where the vast majority of the beneficiaries will work on that particular project. I also want to make a distinction between beneficiaries and participants. So, for example, in this case, where you have a group of villagers in the community who have volunteered to receive food for work, wages to build the road, that principle, so the main participant, let's say a woman, is part of the work team. The beneficiaries we would consider to be all those in her family who benefit from that food for work wage. And we would provide typically a family wage. So it would be more than just for the participant, for the individual worker herself or himself. This would also be enough to provide food for 2 or 3 beneficiaries, in this case for family members. So you may have a certain number of participants in a project, but many more beneficiaries in the community who are benefiting, in this case, from the intervention. What our focus is today in RCIW, in this Food for Work program, is to slowly move from the areas that we have been a number of years in the blue areas, which have been the districts of Nepal where this program started, to move further up. This is based on our vulnerability assessment mapping. Move further up into the most food insecure, most food deficit areas of the country, which are the extreme higher mountain areas in the far west on the border with China, and are some of the most difficult, poorest areas of the country. Now, given the fact that their geography and altitude levels are very challenging, you can well understand when you look at the terms and conditions of being able to work there, you can well understand why they are as bad off as they are. It also makes it much more challenging. And we decided a number of years ago that this is the area that we should expand to and rise to the challenges that would be in the way. So today, what we're looking at with RCIW is working more in partnership with additional partners who have a comparative advantage up in that extreme high mountain area in northwest Nepal. One reason why that extreme northwest area is as food insecure as it is that historically all the routes that had come in from Tibet had been cut off because of the changes in China and Nepal. Political changes, and the border had been sealed, and many of the markets for food in that had dried up in that area, and those areas are much more accessible from the China side, Tibet side, than they were from Nepal itself. So we were looking at more innovative ways of delivering food to those areas. One through convoys of food aid to pay for food for work programs through Tibet, China, back into Nepal. Another one was food for portering. The way food for portering works is that in order to pay the food for work wages, of course, we have to bring the food up many days, in many cases, from the roadhead, from the paved roadhead where a truck could actually deliver the food for many days, and it would have to be carried on the back of porters, they're called, into remote rural Nepal, way up in the mountains. What we found is that many of the porters who we were employing then as part of this program to carry the food themselves were coming from these same communities, very food deficit and food insecure, poor communities. And we came up with an idea that we should be paying these people as well, have a separate component of this program for food for portering. So a type of food for work program to basically pay the porters with food to bring the food up to where the food for work programs were being managed. And we found this extremely successful. Again, for the reasons that I've explained, the porters appreciated having the food rather than the cash, because they still had to use the cash then to be able to purchase the food, often at very high prices, as you can imagine, up in the mountain areas. And then there were a number of tools that were developed for participatory management and transparency in the project. For example, that backbone asset road example that I just talked about in a few previous slides. At the end of every day, there's a blue book, and all the workers, when they finish their shift at the end of the day, meet with the overseer of that project and go through the work that has been accomplished during their shift or during that day. So each worker, for example, knows that they have, as a team, built this amount of kilometers or this so many feet, or they've moved this volume of dirt. They all know that they've done it as a team. It's all written down, and they are paid based on the amount of hours that they work, but also based on the amount of road that they build per day or per shift. The whole idea is that it's all written out. And remember, many of these people have very basic literacy. They may not be able to read well, but when you do this all together, they see that there is no particular overseer or manager who is hiding anything from them. They know exactly that if they do X, they will receive Y. And this may sound like a very basic, almost unnecessary, maybe even bureaucratic concept. But the thing is, this is so important in these communities that they understand that they're all equal, they all work together, and they will get a decent wage for decent work, and they will know ahead of time what it is that they will be receiving. Very important to build community empowerment and self-sufficiency in this way, so that they take responsibility fully for what they're doing and realize that the effort that they put into it, they will get the same in return. Over the years in Nepal, a particular concern, and this is not only in Nepal, this often happens where some of these more remote areas can also be more insecure based on particular security concerns or maybe some terrorism issues, and that it depends on the various situation. In the case of Nepal, there was a Maoist insurgency that had evolved during the period of the implementation of this project, and it became more and more a challenge for us in our implementation.